Order. And look at approval of the minutes of Thursday, May 23rd, 2023.
It's actually Tuesday, but yeah, that goes. May 23rd is correct.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of May 23rd, 2023.
Is there a second? I'll second. Motion been made and seconded that we approve the minutes of May 23rd, 2023. Is there any discussion, any comments?
I have a question on the last item, review agenda items for special meetings. Is that correct date? May 3rd, 2023.
Yeah, because we had it that following week.
Okay, so
Right.
those were the items.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes of May 23rd, 2023 would say aye. And the motion carries. Additions to the agenda for routine administrative matters and or pressing matters that will require ratification at a future meeting.
No, nothing new.
Anyone, anything new to add? If not, I'll move on. Public comment on items not on the agenda, 3 minutes per person. Any public comment? Anyone? Anyone at all? Okay, we'll move on to the manager's report, Depot Street Bridge boring project.
So I'd stuck just some engineering detail in your packets that show that there's going to be some activity down on Canal Street and mostly on the bridge and in the area of the abutments of the bridge. But the engineers have to do some additional subsurface work there. So you probably noticed that we've had some areas closed off and they've been doing some additional borings. Some of the material that's coming out of there will be contaminated, so it'll be put into drums, it'll be stored on site and then hauled away, so you might see drums there for a period of time. There'll also be some dirt that'll be left on site that is not contaminated, and we're going to take that and haul it and use it at our gravel pit just for loam or for additional topsoil. So the next, I think they should be a week, maybe 10 days at the most, down there finishing up with that portion of the project. So we've been working with businesses and hopefully people aren't terribly impacted, but the boring machine can be a pain. And once they're in a spot, it's difficult to move. So there might be some traffic and disruption on that or in area of Canal and Depot. And then you won't see anything again until probably later in the fall when we have probably one more report from the engineers prior to the project going out to bid. Also included in your packet, there is a blog and a website. There's a link on our town website to this, and I would recommend folks, you can add your email if you want to subscribe and get notifications when there's updates. This will be one of the ways that we're hoping that people will keep up with transactional information about the project, because there's going to be all sorts of project scheduling and all sorts of construction work and just disruption in that general area once this project's underway. So we're hoping that this effort will help folks with one stop that they can go to and find out information. It will be kept up to date and posted on a regular basis. So we're hoping that people will get on the website, see the link, put your email address in. It's not a solicitation. We're not going to be sending you anything more than just updates and notifications specific to the project. So it's just another way we're trying to reach out to people and hope that they will understand that, like anything, construction can be a little bit of an impediment to your normal life, but we're working hard to try to give people as much information as we can as this project moves ahead. So
Anything else, Scott?
no, that was it.
Any questions, comments, Jakes?
Do we have a picture of the canal with the design, with the sketch of the bridge coming the new
We do have the
bridge coming
schematics
across?
with the alignments. The only thing that's still not determined, and that's we're waiting on the state historic preservation review of the railing design. And once that's complete, then I'll be able to give you a full picture of what it's going to physically look like. But the alignments are pretty much set.
Now, because there was some confusion at the last meeting, the impression that I had was that it would be not a straight shot over, but more.
It's on an angle. So if you stand there and look, you can picture where it's gonna go, right? When you stand on it. So where that large tree is in the parking lot, it's basically where the new bridge is gonna come across. And then you will be able to have two-way traffic. They've designed turning for larger vehicles. I don't know. The largest vehicles, these 53-foot tractor trailer vehicles might have some difficulty navigating some of that, but a regular, just a box truck or, a smaller type of delivery vehicle should have no trouble whatsoever. And that portion, once the bridge is completely up and running.
Thank you.
And yes,
Quick question for the manager. I think I know the answer to this, but, so back to the, information for the businesses.
Yep.
They're aware of the stuff on the website that
They were actually solicited individually. They did a walk around and actually talked to the people and encouraged them directly to participate. So we're also working with BIFTA, we're working with the chamber, we're trying to get information out as many ways as possible. So.
any other questions for the manager? Any? Okay, we'll move on to the agenda. Item 1 on the agenda is the updated summer meeting schedule.
So thank you for your patience with this. I've been working on a couple of dates that I just wanted to make sure that we had some conflicts. So if you look at the trustees schedule, we obviously have tonight's meeting. Our next meeting would be on the 11th of July. So we would sort of flip-flop with the town board, and then they would do the 18th. We would then have the 22nd for this board, and then our September meeting would be the 12th. And then we do have a tri-board meeting scheduled for the 26th. Then after that, we'll be sort of back into our regular schedule from October on. We just haven't set that up yet. So, but at least for planning purposes, I'm comfortable. I've worked with Paul and worked with Peter to try to eliminate as many conflicts as we could. I apologize if by eliminating some, I created others. I'm hoping this works with everybody with their summer vacation plans. I know it's difficult to try to coordinate with everybody, but this is the schedule that we were able to come up with. So.
Any questions or comments from the board? Anybody else? Thank you.
Great.
Move on to item 2 on the agenda, to review and update proposed ARPA expenditures.
So thank you to Gary and to Connor and Paul for updating. So the board previously had put together a scoring matrix just for projects that had been proposed and under consideration. And really the goal here is to try to give the staff some direction as to projects that we would then try and start to prioritize so that we can meet that 2024 deadline for expenditure, as well as make sure I can go out and get pricing, or if there's scope issues or things that we have to work through before I can report back to you with an idea of what a potential project might be. So Connor and Paul did update their particular project, their scoring. So now you can see this current handout. Gary does have copies if folks want to see a copy. Is sort of where we have netted out. So it took into account projects that had been proposed. Some of the new folks on the board had also looked at some of their issues, and you can see now, based on the scoring at least, the ones that you would see that had the highest potential scoring.
Any questions or comments?
I have a question about just the spending timeline in general. So this needs to be, these funds need to be allocated by June 2024. Is that the
By the
deadline?
end of 2024, they have to be appropriated and they have to be completely expended by 2026. So,
And there's no risk with these funds getting pulled back
there's always a risk with
Okay.
federal funds.
Yep.
Rescission is a real potential if we have a change in federal philosophy. At the moment, we're not anticipating that funds would be removed. So,
December 31st, 2023. We need to make the decision.
no, the end of 24. So December 31 of 24, the funds have to at least be appropriated. And then the projects have to be completed by 26.
And all of the projects listed here, that's a feasible timeline for them?
For every single project, no, but for probably the prioritized projects, if we're looking at the top 4 or 5, I would say we could definitely meet that schedule. Some of these also have multiple overlays with them, so we have, especially for the ones that deal with wastewater and water, they have a separate capital, and the board has seen this where they give us a 10-year and a 20-year capital investment guidance. And so we've used that to do things, tank replacements, major system upgrades, major maintenance in the buildings. So we have that scheduled and we're working, we have a couple of large grants in the state ARPA process for projects that are related to water and sewer projects outside of this $886,000. So the state process they publish what's called an intended use plan, and that sort of is they draw a line in this area. We have $200 million, we funded these 100 projects, and here's your $200 million line, so they draw that line. That's their intended use plan. Then things that fall below that line sometimes are moved up because people in the funded scope can't meet their project deadlines for various reasons. So it's a guidance document, it's not set in stone. But usually when they publish the intended use plan, you have a pretty good indication as where your project's gonna be over the next year. And then they review that every 12 to 18 months, so we're just waiting to find out where we fall on that. The state had said originally that should be done by the end of May. We're at June 21st and I have not heard anything, so I don't know what that means.
Thank you.
Yes.
So what are the next steps for prioritizing and developing each of the categories? I mean, we've got this long list and some of them are just gonna fall off the. So when do we narrow it down and when do we develop? And how does the community understand what the process is and what the projects?
Well, again, the process is really up to the board because you've had a community engagement process. You've gone out and spoken to folks. How you want to go ahead and encumber funds. I mean, I think that's really up to you in terms of how you decide projects fall within your priorities. And then the issue too, quite frankly, on some of these, and we're going to talk a little bit about this tonight when we get into things like radios, the lead time on some of this equipment is 12 months. I mean, we're still into, supply chain problems. So we're gonna have to take a look at some of these and see what can be done fairly quickly and might be able to deploy money and what might have to be encumbered and then wait until materials arrive. So that's a challenge. I would like to see at least if the board looks at this priority listing and says, all right, let's look at the top 5 projects. I can then work with Gary and see if there's other grants that we can supplement some of these with, as well as look at timelines and make sure that we have better updated cost data. So we could come back and report back to you of these 5 projects. Here's where we are. Here's where they potentially can, have matches or have offsets, and how do you want to proceed? So.
Yeah, I'd like to see the discussion of the board move from, because it seems that we've looked at this list. We have a new board.
Yes.
So it's appropriate that we update it, but for those who've been on the board, we've looked at the same list for 4 meetings or
Been a couple meetings.
so.
Right.
To figure out what the next step is and make a plan for, what we're gonna look at, how we're gonna share it, and the timeline for making a decision so that everybody's, the longer we have to make those decisions and put it into play is probably a benefit if we all agree upon how the money's gonna be spent.
Right, I think we ought to try to, if there are items on this list, I happen to notice one here that said, it doesn't qualify for ARPA. It's a maintenance item and it doesn't qualify for ARPA. Okay, well, if there are things on the list that just isn't apropos, then I think we ought to take those off. And I think we ought to, for the higher scoring items, we ought to have maybe each meeting debate one of them, because I think, there's new, Jeff and Wade and I have heard each other's comments about why we voted the way we voted for these different things. Paul and Connor, we haven't heard your rationale, nor have you heard our arguments or debates. So I think if we could do it that way, I think we move it. If we vet one of the higher ones and everybody seems to come to a reasonable agreement, we can tag that one as one to fund. Maybe we can keep the amount still a little bit up in the air, but it would seem to me that would be a way to bring this list down. Another item that I wanted to mention about this is, I think everybody realizes that energy costs are a big part of budgets, our municipal budgets, and having solar would be a way of helping to, quote, reduce the cost. But municipalities don't get the tax advantages. So my question is, when we've been approached by other companies that do this work, do these fields, I'm sure they have investors lined up that are looking for the tax benefits. And then they look at companies like us to commit to some of the capacity that the field produces. So could we somehow get somebody to look at trying to put together an investor group that would do this for the town or for the village? That way, we might invest some of these funds, but we're not paying the full price and not getting the tax advantage. So it would seem as though there may be people, some of the wealthier people in the town or the village or nearby that might be willing to invest in these things.
Yeah, I think the challenge is, Jake, is because the most recently passed federal legislation, so that Investment Reduction Act, had a whole subsection of just alternative energy sources, battery storage, subsidies, all sorts of subsidies for non-traditional, non-fossil fuel types of energy. And how those programs are rolling out, they still haven't even done the notice yet on the federal level about how these projects are going to be offered, so to speak. If they're going to be offered through, like the Wyndham Regional is doing for like this building, we're looking at that MERP project for the roof, and we're going to talk about that in more detail later. That grew out of that program. They're just now putting that program together to reach out to us as a community to say, okay, you have to do this energy audit, and if you do it, you qualify for this, and it's $600,000 that you would potentially then be able to use so that we could put an insulated membrane on the roof here. There's a lot of these other projects that relate to battery systems that then can take you off the grid during high demand times, and then you'd be able to then use your battery storage to reduce your overall energy, your costs per kilowatt. But those are still, they haven't rolled those out yet. So I understand, I would like to be able to do that because we do have some sites at that, this building, we're getting prepped for that. We've talked about it at the wastewater plant. We've also talked about capturing the heat from the dryer process and trying to recycle the heat and seeing what we'd be able to do with that, because there are ways we can do that and then use it in the plant itself. So we're researching that, and that's part of that larger grant that I talked about, that we're waiting to hear from the intended use plan about whether or not parts of that got funded through other sources. And then the water department certainly has, has areas that we could potentially look at too. So I think, I'm hopeful that they'll pull some of these together in a way that we can then talk about them in the next month or two, and be able to say, let's do this, or no, we're not gonna, participate in that, let's go this direction. They just haven't put those together yet to be able to tell you that.
Just quickly, there's two folks in the waiting room.
Sure.
I have a
Deb's
point
got her hand up too.
of clarification. Jakes had referenced that there was, items that were not appropriate for ARPA because of maintenance, but those are comments from the trustees, not,
Oh, these are, okay.
not,
Yeah.
ARPA.
Oh, okay, that's not our,
Not
that
an
wasn't
ARPA, not an
our.
ARPA restriction, just.
But if there was an ARPA restriction,
I mean, so for example, if you just look at the highest scores, right? If you look at the top three current highest scoring by this matrix, the first one is the GRAS boiler, and Marty is here, so we could talk a little bit about that. The biosolid program, we're still waiting on, we have a large state grant that we've submitted, as well as a Long Island Sound Futures Fund grant that we've submitted. So we're waiting to hear back on those two particular sources. The third one is sidewalk improvements. That's traditionally been an area that the town has worked on. I know we talked about it at the last tri-board meeting about upping that annual contribution to sidewalks to, a number closer to 100,000 a year, and seeing how that would work over a multi-year period to try to reduce some of our sidewalks that are in poor condition. And I think the town is taking that seriously. The one that I just don't know too much about, and maybe the board can give us some guidance on, is the other one, which was this $200,000 in projects set up by the community ARPA process. So I'm not quite sure what the thought was there. If there was some specifics to that, that would help me understand what you were trying to accomplish, or what the thought was there. Because that one was rather vague.
Well, the question, I don't know how the question was brought into the survey, but the question was placed before the board as to whether we wanted to designate $200,000 to items that Des Moines Associates got out of the public process. So I think that narrowed it down to 3 areas, and then we would have to work with the community on what that would be my guess, or we would have to find underneath that umbrella projects that would satisfy that goal or that wish.
Okay. Yep. We got Deb that wants
Yeah.
to weigh in. Should I grab her first?
Yeah.
Deb, could you unmute?
Yeah, I wanted to be sure that the board had their opportunity. A couple of questions. One, things may have changed. So what are the 5 top priorities, which I know you listed a couple of them, Scott. So what are the 5 top priorities now for the village trustees on the ARPA funds? As someone already pointed out.
Based on this metrics, GRAS, the boiler, was the highest scoring. The biosolid program was the second. Sidewalk improvements and the community input projects were tied for third, so that's 3 and 4. And then the 5th one was housing, creating shovel-ready development sites for housing. So those, if you're looking at them in terms of the order on this current ratings sheet, that would be the 5 that score the highest.
I'm sorry, you mentioned the $200,000 for community projects. Is that not one of those 5?
It was separate, so it must have been looked at separately.
Okay.
No, it's 5.
It's tied for
Right.
top third.
Right.
It's number 3 tied with another one for number 3.
Correct.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you. And the other question is, well, I guess part of that is the sidewalk issue is that the village has an agreement. It's 20+ years with the as a tri-board agreement with the town for them to handle the sidewalks, lights, and streets. I think that's the 3 items in exchange for our pit, which I'm not sure what the viability of that is any longer. But the reality is that's an agreement, and now you're setting a precedent by saying that the village will now put money into sidewalks, which is not their bailiwick, basically. So just want me aware that we're making a major change, which will have more significance down the road. That's one. And the last question, the actual second question, was to ask again, has the town allocated any ARPA funds towards the GRAS funding stack, as the village is being asked to do? And if not, why not? Thank you.
Sure. Well, I can't answer everything on behalf of the town. The town monies, the largest majority of the town money is going towards the projects that are already been identified. So the roof of this building, the match that goes to the Save America's Treasures grant for the meeting house. And then the third one was the, I'm drawing a blank on the third one. Oh, the train station. So the vast majority of their money is going to be eaten up in those three projects. The village has double the amount of the money that the town has. So that was the thought, I think. And again, I can't answer fully for the town, but I think that was the thought of where they were investing their funds.
Any other questions, comments?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
So I agree with Jeff. It'd be good to tackle one of these at each meeting. But to me, it's clear that moving forward, right out of the box, number 1 and 2 are gonna be funded through ARPA, or at least portions of it, without a doubt, based on these scores. So,
So maybe the July 11th meeting, if we'd be ready to talk about the boiler fund and the solid storage program.
If we know for sure where we stand on those two major grant requests, then I think I could give you a real definitive answer. If we haven't gotten the state response back on the intended use plan, we probably won't be much further along than we are today.
Okay, I think we could flesh out each of the items and once the grants are available, but I think allocation of funds would be premature until we consider the whole grouping of, you know, are we gonna fund 3 things, or are we gonna fund 5 things, and then allocate based upon where the impact would be most significant. And then I was just gonna share the results of the Des Moines Associates. They ranked the community points for Town of Rockingham, Village of Bellows Falls, and Village of Saxonburg. That's for the Village of Bellows Falls, the 3 things that came to the top. A transportation master plan district. I don't understand exactly what a master plan for transportation in the districts lacking in development. Is that right there?
Yeah, that's what it says there.
And outdoor
Their report,
recreation.
it truncates the projects, but if you had a list of things that you wanted details on, we could bring the full, it's just like 50 pages, so we want to pull out the ones you want the full project description.
So the 3 were the transportation master plan, and outdoor recreation was 1. Install solar panels, rooftop village buildings, water, wastewater department was 2. And the 3rd was sustainably designed community center for youth and seniors.
Because
Yes.
the reason I voted for that was one of the interpretations that Gary had put down was that we would offer incentives to individuals that would purchase properties that are not currently livable and return those dwellings to livable units. And kind of to stimulate private investment in dilapidated villages, properties around the village. And so I was all over that. I thought that was a great idea, but that's not what those three things here, because we've got several solar projects.
Right.
But anyway, I think that there is still some confusion on that item. I do think it has a lot of merit.
The housing was number 1 for us. In that report.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that to me has a lot of interest, but
Anything else? Yes.
Great. I'm Robert McBride, resident. And unfortunately, I was not able to go to any of those public meetings and stuff because it was developed. But, I think we're all very mindful this is a one-time investment opportunity, the money being given us. And I don't know if there's anywhere, sort of a paragraph description, each of those projects. If there's someone that wrote it up to describe the scope of the project, a total budget on what they expected the project was, so you can see what your investment might be against the total project. And, what is the sort of maintenance that it creates over a period of time? Because we're not going to be getting this federal money regularly. Maybe some of those things would help equally look at that as you're going through the 5 projects. You'll see, and then of course, if Scott and Gary are exploring other leveraging grants that could be given, a total bigger picture. So the best way that you guys can invest this money for us, they're going to get bang for the buck.
Anything else?
Well, if you take a look, one of the things that I put on your dais to take a look at tonight is the memo that talks about ARPA investments in the town hall and the opera house. So this is just one of the discussion points. So the goal here is to try to figure out, and I'm just using this building as one example. We're going to talk to something with the police and fire and an upgrade on the radio system separate from this. But we are still paying off, we mean the taxpayers, not necessarily the village, but the taxpayers are paying off the last bond that was put on this building to do all the opera house and other miscellaneous updates. So we owe 2 more bond payments on that. So the goal here has been to try to make capital improvements in this building as we approach the 100th anniversary without adding more bond debt, so that we can have some flexibility as we go forward, either to take pressure off the tax rate, or if we have to reinvest in other projects, we have some capacity for bonding to do that. So if you look at this particular breakdown, this started with a very simple project, right? We were going to buy some theatrical lighting for the opera house. Originally, it was a small scale project, not a big deal. It has morphed into a significant project that required major roof truss reinforcement, which we did over the winter. We purchased almost $175,000 worth of theatrical lighting. And then we have offsets to that with various sources of funds, the state cultural facilities grant monies, shuttered venue grant monies, and some town funds. But we're still short of the initial investment, which is just the first phase of the truss reinforcement that we talked about to support this new membrane, because the roof leaks. If you guys look at any of the plaster, you realize that we have a roof leak problem. So just in the larger scope of things, going forward with that, and the town still has to make some other decisions, but I wanted to play this out so the village, so people can understand the kinds of things that we're looking at. To finish the rest of that project, so we have a second phase of truss reinforcement, which needs to take place, and that's going to be new steel beams put into the roof to carry additional load. And that load's already been calculated for snow load, so we're going to have an insulated membrane, as well as potential structural load if we decide to place an array on the roof so that it could handle that solar array. So all of that went into this. So the project that was originally just this little, $50,000 lighting project has morphed into roughly, $1.2 million by the time you look at the roof replacement. And of that, if we get this Paul Brune grant, which we're applying for in the fall, and we get the MERP grant for the actual roof membrane itself, we'll have gotten another $800,000 worth of federal support on top of the money that's already been invested through grants. So that's almost $900,000 of $1.2 million into this project, which we would have had to have gone out and bonded for if we were going to try to do this as a standalone entity. So with that, we've only invested so far a small amount of town operating funds. And we've asked for some ARPA funds from the town and some ARPA funds potentially from the village to help with the roof truss support, so we can support this building going into the future. And then you can see the breakdown of where all the rest of this money would come from. So that's the kind of leveraging we're trying to do on these projects, so that we can try to avoid adding to our long-term debt profile, because I think both boards have said they wanted to see ourselves try to reduce our debt overall, which we're committed to doing. But to leverage as many of these funds right as we can get our hands on right now, because we are in a golden window here. I've never seen, and I don't think we'll see again, for federal support for these types of, of projects. So just for this building alone, that's roughly $1.2 million, which would take us to its 100th anniversary, and also include finishing the window project and finishing the brick point, which needs to be done if you look at the outside of this building. So those are the types of investments that I think people are looking for, and then the leverage that they're looking for. The question is, I don't know how the board feels about investing some of the village ARPA funds in that to help offset some of that overall cost, because we're looking at the long-term maintenance and the long-term support to this building. So that's why this was put into your packages tonight for consideration. And you can see the breakdowns. It's a fairly complicated project, multiple sources of grant funds and multiple sources of other funds that still have to get public approval. At some point, we'd have to go probably at town meeting next year. If we're successful on the Paul Bruin grant, those require a match. We'd have to go and ask the public in an article if they would be willing to match. So I think for the most part, when we've asked them for capital funds, people have been responsive because I think they appreciate the effort that's gone into trying to leverage these funds as aggressively as possible. So we're not just, taking taxpayers and burdening them with all these additional costs that Robert had talked about, where these future costs outweigh some of the initial investment. The flip side of that is, if you didn't want to invest $1.2 million, we could build a new town hall. If you guys felt like it, and wanted to endure the wrath of the entire community. But otherwise, this is the other option. If you want to maintain this building, which I'm assuming most everybody does.
Correct.
This email doesn't show that $1.2 million.
If you add up everything, Jake, so if you walk down the current theatrical lighting project, which is $245, then you walk through the additional projects, right? The new roof truss project, which will go on through this budget, right? So that gets you up to $345, and then you've got $400,000 in the window and brick pointing with the Paul Bruin and the potential article, and then the MRP grant is another $600,000.
Okay, so you're adding those
So
five.
all those things together. So that's the full program to try to get this building up to 100th anniversary standard, so that we can showcase it and hopefully feel good about stewardship.
That mean it'll be warm when we come in here in the winter for meetings? Or
Warmer,
is that going to warm?
warmer. I won't guarantee warm. I'll guarantee warmer and cooler in the summer, but I won't guarantee cool.
Never complained about that.
In the summer, well, we're in the basement, so that does help. But
Is a picture like this a reasonable ask for the top 5 projects that we're considering? Because this is helpful to see not only what the cost of village ARPA investment would be, but then also seeing all these other different points of leverage.
Right.
Building a plan. So is that?
this is what we're trying to do with your other priority projects. This one's been underway for a while, so I could do this with real money, because we've been working on this for a while. Right, we've already done, the lighting is up and installed. The first phase of the roof truss project has been done, the first reinforcement, the second reinforcement's out to bid. So these are really pretty real numbers. And then the MERP is the max you can get under that new grant program. We've already contacted Wyndham Regional to do our energy assessment.
Because to Robert's point, I think it would be hard for me to continue having this conversation in a meaningful way without more to go off of. And that would be useful as we're
Other
narrowing
projects
down.
just aren't that developed because either the funding sources are not as clear, or in the case of some of these projects, like we talked about, like the investment for home ownership, how that would work, if that would be a grant program or a loan program or a revolving loan, there's lots of ways to do that. We would have to take that and try to put together a package that the board would then consider possibly using it as seed money. There are ways to do that. So.
Right.
And you can leverage some of those funds with other funds, which also then are available, so you might be able to double that impact, so that 200 could become a 400. Because a lot of these require 50% match. So, but I have not done the research, Gary hasn't done the research to be able to give you a definitive answer to, you know, or a breakdown like that. So, yes, Jake.
Just on the GRAS boiler.
Yes,
Let's say we pledged $100,000 to the GRAS boiler.
Mhm.
And we have a deadline to spend this money, has to be spent by 2026.
Yes.
yeah.
So by just contributing it to the fund, does that work? Or does it mean that the new boiler would
Well,
have?
Marty has to order
would
her
have to
boiler,
be
her
installed?
boiler. She has to order her boiler in order to meet the next cycle, because like everything else, it's tied up in supply chain. She's here, she can probably give you a better breakdown.
Do you see what I'm saying? It's the-
Yeah, I do see, yes.
And it's kind of true of some of these other thoughts of like investing in trying to incentivize someone to buy a house and make it habitable.
Right.
If they don't do it by a certain time, then
What happens
what
with those
happens?
funds?
Exactly, yeah. So,
Yeah, I think Gary had a question, yeah.
Yeah, so with the GRAS boiler, if the town writes the check to the GRAS boiler fund, and that money is out of our fund and it's into GRAS's project, then we're covered, and that
okay,
could be done.
all right, that answers my question.
For the housing project, if we took, say, 3 of the houses that are uninhabitable and they couldn't be rehabbed and the town demolished them, we took care of the contamination. We could use our access to grants to get the projects remediation to get them ready for development and use these ARPA funds to leverage those cleanup grants. That would be the incentive. It would then be feasible for a developer. And that wouldn't it wouldn't be dependent on when the developer, what would be the clawback for the developer would be if they didn't engage in the activity by the time we set, then it would be offered to someone else, we would take it back. But in terms of us expending the funds, we would do that with the demolish and the cleanup. So that would happen straight away.
Okay,
And I think we've already put together a short list of projects that could be redeveloped fairly quickly. But we have not done the environmentals, the phase ones, as Gary said, we haven't really gone and done the due diligence to give you real numbers. But back to the GRAS boiler, I think, I did include some updates because we had been working on a CDBG grant to help offset some of that cost, and Marty spent a significant amount of time with Gary and I tried to help get as much data as we could to the committee that did the evaluation for this. Thought we had a strong application. You guys can see in the email that we weren't successful. Very disappointed in that outcome, and I'm trying to understand why this didn't get funded. I realize there's always more projects than funding. I'm not idealistic to think that everything gets submitted gets funded, but I certainly thought that this fit most of the criteria that they were trying to address. So apparently the real challenge is their number 1 and number 2 and number 3 priority is housing. So if that is the case, I think with that in mind, I think we should take some of our ARPA funds and leverage the hell out of CDBG money for housing. And make that a very direct and distinct, okay, you've told us, so if that's the case, we're going to invest some of our ARPA money in GRAS, but in return, you're gonna help replace some of that money with an aggressive CDBG investment in our housing program. Because that's what they told us up and down they were going to do, and that was their number 1 priority. So the only thing I could take out of that without feeling like I was being a jerk was to say, okay, then we will prioritize accordingly. And that's gonna be our focus, to try to get in that next round of funds, to try to get some CDBG funds if the board's willing to match some of your seed money, and see if we can't make a substantial investment on the housing front which might free up some of your funds to help sort of replace the monies that did not go into the GRAS boiler that we were anticipating from the CDBG program. But with that all being said, I did want to talk about, like I said, this breakdown, because there are some opportunities here. I'm going to go to the town and talk to them about the same thing for the 55,800. But that is a real ask as we go forward, as one of the priorities that we'd like to at least have the board take into consideration to help with this overall town hall and opera house renovation process.
Can I just speak to the glass boiler?
Yes.
So, the thing I find interesting is that the focus on housing, and most of the housing is for LMI, well, not all of it. And if you have an influx of extra housing and everything, you need services. Yeah, that's what we do. So that's why it was originally projects, because we provide all the services that folks in the town need: social services, behavioral health, primary care, pediatric care, within walking distance, on the on. So I just found that's, if you have one, you have to have the other. And to answer, I don't know if Deb's still online, but to answer the reason for asking the village of Bellows Falls for the funding is the village of Bellows Falls would be most affected if GRAS didn't exist. The town of Rockingham, not so much, but the village itself, that's 85 jobs gone, 85 people that stop at the coffee shop, that shop at the bookstore, that whatever. So I just wanted to address those two things. If you have any questions, I have a new approach and working on more funds for possible funding.
Okay.
So that's what happened.
So Marty, on a timing standpoint, if there needed to be an investment of village ARPA into a GRAS boiler project, when would your next sort of critical investment time decision?
So my critical timing is September.
Okay.
When I was working on the community development block grant, they asked me to do two things. They asked me to make sure I had accurate cost estimates. So I checked with Boiling Energy, who has been kind of, helping us with this. I also do want to point out that the project cost that I'm quoting is the entirety of the project. It's not just the boiler. It's from soup to nuts. It's from project development through engineering, permitting process, commissioning and testing, and the entirety of the project. Like I said, at this point, the cost would not change, so I'm working with an accurate budget right now. I adjusted some timeline issues, and September is the magic time, and I need to be able to pull the trigger to order the boiler in order for it to get here to be done next non-heating season, next summer. Those are the two constraints I'm working with: is lead time on the boiler, and the fact that the project can only be done in this small window of time, and we don't need boilers, which is basically, well, this year, normally it's June to September, but this year it's gonna be closer to July to September. So those are the two constraints that I have. So the magic time is September. I need to have my funding all lined up and secured in order to get a notice to proceed with Northern Borders, which is my biggest grant. That's the $800,000 grant. They will not allow a notice to proceed without proving that you have all the funding lined up. So that's why I'm
So we could also then work with, obviously, we have some time between now and September, but we can work with the CDBG people as a follow-up to this to see what we could do. If just in concept, we take the 200,000 that we've identified and say, if we wanted to leverage our $200,000 of ARPA funds into specific investments within the village, what opportunities are there with CDBG money to leverage this and make it a larger impact? And see what we could try to come up with so that we would have something that we could report back to you on. And then if it looks like it makes some sense, then we'd be able to at least have the board give us because the CDBG process, and Gary and Marty can certainly tell you, is not easy to get their application and apply. So if there is some ability for us to do that, then I think we would have to identify it by July. And have the application sort of approved and ready to go by August, so you can make decisions on that larger investment, if you're gonna make a larger investment across with this other opportunity to leverage your CDBG funds. You might be able to kill two birds with one stone by September.
What would the notification be from CDBG as far as whether they award?
They're not, usually they turn around pretty quickly, so if you get the application in September, I think it's November, it's the award. Right?
November's the board meeting.
Yeah, but they award at that meeting, so you have to have your application in by September. So we would definitely work on doing that. So that, you know, those are somewhat interrelated, those two things.
Wait,
I'd like to make a motion
okay,
that the board approve the 100. I guess the actual balance would be 89,000, 88,000 roughly to GRAS for the boiler. To me, it's a given that it's, I mean, it's a top scoring item. We already addressed the fact that we were gonna fund it with $100,000. We gave, what was it, 12 or 13,000?
We were given money up front to help with some of the NEPA process, but now you don't have to do as aggressive a NEPA process because we're not doing CDBG funds.
Okay.
So some of that could be redirected just to support the purchase.
So my motion would be to, as of now, move forward and commit them $100,000 to GRAS ASAP towards the boiler. I mean, it looks to me like we're gonna do it anyway. $100,000 minus whatever that figure was that we gave here.
Right.
It was 15, I think.
It was up to 15.
Yeah.
Right.
As soon as possible. Then we'd have that, we move that one off the table. We know we're gonna do it anyway, so might as well just do it. Move on to the next one.
is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so we got a motion on the table to give GRAS $100,000 for their boiler funding
Their biomass boiler, yes.
from ARPA
Correct. Yes.
For discussion,
for discussion.
that doesn't hold us to not to
You
increase.
can make a modification to that, absolutely.
We could increase.
That's
the
just an
savings.
initial investment.
Any other discussion? Seeing no other discussion, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The motion carries. Now Scott, also looking at the proposed ARPA investment, the town hall and opera house,
Yes.
the $55,800, are you looking for a motion tonight?
I could wait if you want to tie it to the town, because I still have to go to the town meeting on the 18th. It's up to you. You can make a contingent upon the town following through on their investment, which they're going to do. So this is a project we're committed to finishing.
Okay.
We want to have this roof project done for that 100th anniversary, so the timing is somewhat important, so that would be helpful. But if you could do a resolution, I would appreciate it. Just tie it to also the town appropriating ARPA funds as well.
Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion. I move that the village trustees allocate $55,800 of the ARPA funds to be designated to the town hall opera house lighting project.
It's actually the roof truss reinforcement.
Roof project.
Yeah, we're keeping the lighting separate, because that is a whole separate and distinct project.
Contingent on the town also.
Town.
Correct.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
So a motion's been made and seconded that the village trustees would appropriate $55,800 of ARPA funds for the town hall opera house roof project. Contingent on the town doing the same. Motion been made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
I have a comment.
Yes.
I'm opposed to it, which is fine, but, because technically, we're already giving ARPA funds to the village, to the town, correct? That's village taxpayers. Am I thinking through that right?
I would,
I mean, the village taxpayers are already using, we already pay town taxes.
right, but this isn't tax money,
No, it's ARPA money,
that's ARPA money.
but it's our ARPA money is town residents as well.
No, it's really, it's funny because the way the ARPA is, it took if you take the population of the town of Rockingham, they broke it into three parts. So the village of Bellows Falls has the largest number of people, and they got the biggest piece. So the town, the select board piece is actually the piece which represents rural Rockingham, I guess, because
Yeah,
it would
I-
exclude Saxon's River residents and
I think,
Bellows Falls.
I recall that now that you mention it.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion of giving $55,800 of ARPA, village ARPA funds for the town hall opera house roof project, contingent on the town doing the same, would say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no?
No,
The ayes have it and the motion carries.
And we will come back to you at your July meeting to follow up. Gary and I will follow up on the CDBG leverage and see what we can do
Okay.
on that one specifically.
At this time, we will move on to item 3 on the agenda to review and update the police fire building project.
So there had been, since I gave you the last updated memo on the 15th, there was additional updates on the 16th. So if you look on your, there's a memo from me to you from tonight, updating that USDA community facilities grant, as well as just breaking down the project in a larger context. So historically, when we applied for the original grant money, so the $50,000 grant, which we did receive from USDA, it was very specific. It had to leverage a specific amount of funds in order to be funded at the maximum amount of 50,000. So that's where we got the original matches from that we had gone through, and the boards had allocated previous amounts of money, which I had shown for the PD, for the fire now, and the highway as well. Now, what's happened is, since that occurred, we had the March storms, we had the loss of all of our radio systems during that last storm in March. When our contractor got up onto Fall Mountain to see what had happened to the repeaters, they found a host of other problems that also needed to be updated and repaired. Then he came back to our dispatch, and as we talked about, he also found a host of problems with our dispatch equipment that was going to be obsolete and not be able to support this new PW interoperability standard that the feds are pushing all of the first responders to basically update their communication systems with. So we went back and asked this contractor to then give us an updated proposal that would deal with the dispatch problems, all the problems with the repeaters and the issues on Fall Mountain, 20 portable radios, which will be part of this project. And then we had to break that out in terms of what the fire equipment committee was going to pay for, what the grant was going to pay for, and then what the new money was to then fund the balance that was owed for the dispatch equipment. So what you can see here is my updated memo, which shows you that you roughly need to spend another $84,386 to do the total project, which is now $241,000 for all in. Now that is with a National Association of State Purchasing Office. So that's the NASPO contract pricing. So that's a national cooperative purchasing agreement. So that's giving you a percentage off of list pricing for all your Motorola equipment. So all the equipment there was discounted by that NASPO pricing, which is greater than what we could have gotten if we had gone out and tried to bid it as just a standalone entity. So with that discount applied, we still have a gap in order to get this project funded of $84,386. My recommendation, if the board would be willing, is that we could use some existing funds. We are currently trending, if you look at the budget status reports and also the the village general fund balance report, you can see that we're trending positively for this year. At the moment, our current fund balance for just the village general fund is $950,000. So we could comfortably entertain that cost within there and still be above our $701,000 carryover from the prior fiscal year. And we're still trending in a positive direction. We don't have a couple more weeks in the current fiscal year, so I don't anticipate that we'll have any catastrophic projects. So we will still see an add to fund balance, even with this additional expense. Timing is important again, because with all of the delays in the supply chain, if I place the order this month, it's still a minimum of 12 months to get all these materials in. So that's why I didn't want to wait until July, because the timing just keeps stretching on the supply chain. So that's an update to a
So
larger
Scott,
project. Yes,
the numbers, I'm struggling with reconciling the numbers.
okay,
Okay, so let's start with 241.
yes,
We got 50,000 from the grant.
correct,
So now we're down to 191. Okay,
yes.
what's currently committed to the 191?
If you look at the breakdown of the 191 jigs, look at the 34,367, which is the PD portion, the 18,883, which is the fire portion. The select board is gonna be spending 34,367 out of highway funds to support the highway portion. And then the balance of that would be the 84,386. And that's where you get to the total.
Well, what about these numbers up above? Fire equipment funds, 15,000, town of Rockingham, 15, police fire dispatch, 16. Those are the old numbers?
Those are the old numbers.
Okay, so you scratch those off.
Yes,
Okay. So now we've already, the trustees already approved 34.
under the old proposal, because we're gonna still have to update the repeaters, that's where that number came from. For
So we
police,
previously approved roughly 52,000.
correct,
And then the highway fund's gonna chip in 34.
right.
And
The new money that we're asking is operating funds,
it
To cover the
comes up to
dispatch.
170, it's 52, 34, and 84.
Scott,
yes, Alyssa,
the select board also did the 18,883, the same as the village. So that might be the difference he's looking for.
okay. But that was a fire equipment fund, it was not specific to, right?
Because it would seem to me that this thing really helps everybody,
Yes,
but all the fire departments,
correct,
all of the fire departments, our police department, obviously,
right,
and the highway fund,
correct,
okay? So you got 191,000, of course, it was because of the village that we got the 50,000.
to be eligible, right, the village applied for that,
So we got the 50,000,
right,
okay? So then we got of the 190,000, you're still looking for us for 34 plus 34 plus 34 plus 84.
so the fire equipment committee, right, which is again town funds, was gonna spend the original match of the 18,883.
So what are they proposing now?
So they're gonna do that plus the 34,367. So they would be in for roughly, what is that, 52,000?
Yeah.
Roughly,
18.
right,
So that, but you said it's already approved by the trustees, so it's not the trustees, this is the highway funds.
we did it at the joint meeting the last time we looked at this,
So both groups approved
right.
for the same amount of contribution.
So now we still have to go back and ask for more money from highway because it's a little more money. And we didn't, and their repeater was part of the problem that occurred during that storm event. Not the only problem, but part of it. So there was more cost associated with that.
So of the 191, how much are you asking the village for?
So you would be, so it would be the 84,000 for dispatch, which is new, the 84,386 is new money based on the total proposal, because when they came in to do the updates, they also needed to update the dispatch. So that's new money for sure, the 84. Then with the,
Does that aid anybody other than the police department,
well,
the dispatch?
in order for this system to work, we have to update that console. The console is obsolete and it won't, it's past being supported, so I can't get parts for it.
No, what I'm saying is, we have to do it, but is the only one that benefits from that is the police department.
Well, it's used by, conceivably, the dispatch is used by, in one of these events, they would, police, fire, and DPW would have the capacity to use that because that's the interoperability standard. Most of the time, the fire is with Keene, and so they're dispatched separately. And then you still got the sheriff, which dispatches us after hours.
Right, oh, no,
Right.
no,
So I
okay,
mean,
so,
I hesitate to say exactly who it supports, because it depends on when the damn thing goes off.
you already had.
I know you're
So you
concerned
got
about the breakdown, you don't think it's,
84
right.
that you want from us, and then how much of the other part of the, to add to 191, I wanna know
So you would then, so yeah, forget the highway portion, because that's town, right?
Yeah.
So then you would have the
well, we,
addition,
of course, we pay,
but it comes out of
Our
the
share
town
of the
highway
town.
fund,
Yeah.
right? So it would be a separate allocation.
Yeah.
So then you would still have the 18,883, which is part of the repeater updates and some of the updates on Fall Mountain. And then the 34,367, which is again part of the repeater updates and some of the Fall Mountain stuff for PD. So that would be, so if we added the 34 plus the 18 jigs plus the 84,
so 136,
roughly,
Yeah.
right? I didn't add up the three somethings.
and then the town and Saxons River, and Bellows Falls kicks in the other 55. It just,
So
it
the
just
town,
seems,
would kick in about 52, because the fire equipment fund would do about 18,800, and then the highway would do 34,300. And then you still have the grant to leverage against it.
but I mean, but keep in mind that, if the village represents 60% of the town funds,
Right.
we're providing 60% of that piece. It just seems to me that I'm not questioning the necessity to do this
Right.
or the importance of this, okay, at all. I'm just saying that the village, on top of the fact that we were able to get this 50,000 grant, which is totally village, I don't think the allocation's fair, quite frankly. I think we're paying a disproportionate amount of the cost. And, we just gave money for the town hall, which again is supposed to be the town's responsibility. I think and as I said, you heard me, I said, I just think the allocation is wrong.
We get into some very strange financial relationships because of the fire equipment committee. I guess that's the only way I can put it. And that's been historically part of the challenge. So if the village needs to replace a piece of apparatus, the town buys it, right? Same thing with Saxons River, same thing with Rockingham. And so that's the relationship that drives a lot of the cost decisions, the major cost decisions, which is equipment replacement. This one's a little odd just because of the way dispatch works. If it was traditional, I could say, yeah, there's a way we could allocate this accordingly. But we split up our dispatch responsibilities with 3 different entities. So it makes it hard for me to determine what the appropriate allocation of that cost should be, James, because it's just not consistent, right? I mean, they're still paying, the fire still has, the Keen system. And we use the sheriff and all the, after hours, and we're not running our own dispatch, so it's hard for me to say what a fair allocation of that should be. I understand completely your concern. I just didn't have any other way that I could come up with to allocate that made sense.
Even if you split it in thirds, and the police and fire made up 2/3 of that. So thinking what Jake's thinking, then that would put us roughly around 160,000. Which would be 28,000 less than what we're at now. To go with what you're saying, which even if you just did a simple breakdown, one third.
All right.
But that leaves, that
Yeah,
means,
the allocations
that
get
means somebody else
screwed
has gotta kick in 26 grand, roughly.
because of that fire equipment committee relationship. The allocations aren't traditional. And, it's a challenge because it's not always one entity. Doesn't seem like the burden falls consistently so that you can divide it out.
Well, I just think that we ought to, do a little bit more analysis and say, all right, which is the fire piece that comes out of the fire fund?
Right.
What's the highway piece? And what's the police piece? And I think that it's a different allocation.
I mean, we can certainly go back and talk to the fire equipment committee and see if there's a way that maybe we can pick up a larger piece. We're gonna meet again in July. So we're gonna have to go over the study, people that are submitting on the RFP for the feasibility study. So this is just a little glimpse into the challenges of when we're trying to figure this out with multiple entities. And the fairness part of it, I struggle with it too. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying I don't have a better answer at the moment.
Well, it does, I mean, on a day-to-day basis, the majority of the usage of this would be for the village. However, it does allow the town access through the radios as well.
Right.
In the event of a incident, large-scale incident, or natural disaster or whatever, then it would be part of all that too.
Right, there is interoperability. The real true advantage, beside the fact that these are digital radios and a better technology, is the fact that in a large scale event, we would have the ability to communicate
To everybody.
which right now is a little bit of a challenge.
Which nobody's quibbling about. We're not
Right.
quibbling about that.
Right.
I just think that
How you get there is.
I'm just
part of
saying
the
that when you look at it outside of something out of the ordinary,
Right,
the majority of the day-to-day use is basically Billy's.
if the village taxpayers weren't already contributing their fair share of the fire fund and the highway fund,
Right.
right.
this wouldn't be such a big deal. But it's a big deal because the benefits are really should be shared 3 ways. And, so 55,000, out of 241,000 just doesn't seem like enough.
You don't have a deadline other than assuming we place the order.
Right, it just delays implementation of the ordering time schedule.
So we can look at the numbers again in July.
Yeah. So,
And I think, and I would ask you to look at how you feel the allocation ought to be.
right. We'll take another stab at it. Like I said, we'll take another look at it through fire equipment and then come back, see if there's a way we can revise it
Great.
for July.
Anything else on that, number 3 on the agenda?
The only other thing is, again, we do have a pre-application that we'll be working with on the lift for the Lula. We have not heard back from the state yet on our request for the waiver. So I can't fill out the grant application until I know for sure that they're gonna grant us the waiver. Sean has called and left messages, we just haven't gotten any communication back, so I'll update you again in July if we're able to do that, and then that, again, we'll go in September for November review.
Anything else? If not, we'll move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is discuss appointment of the village moderator.
So I think, the question is, do you want us to put something on the website? How do you want to go about? You want to put out a general request to people, see who's interested? I had received one solicitation just by email, which I can share with the board, but we have not gone out and done anything to advertise.
Right, I think we do need to go out and advertise, and just
Just
find out.
advertise the vacancy?
Yes,
Okay. We can certainly do that.
and, either at our July meeting or our August meeting, we ought to appoint.
Okay,
And by that point, I need to resign because I have been sworn in.
Yeah.
Just to make, just in case we ran into some situation. So
okay.
that takes about one email and about 8 words, so.
We will do that, get that out, and then bring that back to you for July.
Just testing out this whole.
Yeah.
Okay.
What about the stipend?
You have to keep track.
Until you run the meeting, there is a mistake.
Oh,
And we'll go on to item 5, which is financials.
So we did hand out, Chase had requested, and Alyssa had printed out the general ledger for all 3 funds, as well as the budget status report, which you had received in your packets over the weekend. It was also in in your handouts from this evening, just some updates from Alyssa, and she is on the phone there, Alyssa, if you wanted to jump into your memo. Oh, she's walking away. Don't walk away. You gotta unmute yourself.
Okay,
You're back in action.
so I got a phone call today from Jigs, and so I just wanted to touch on a few of the things that we talked about. I was really busy doing payroll today because Brenda was out, so this was done really fast. But I wanted to just highlight a few of the things that might look a little weird in the status report. We have the tax abatement. It looks really large, but we had a long list of properties that had been just left with no solution, and nobody did anything about them, and they've been there for years. So we compiled that list, and we just wanted to get them off of the tax rolls so that they didn't continue to create a false tax amount. We just wanted to get them off. So it looks like it's a really large amount, but those have been building up for years, and we hope that that won't continue, and we'll be able to keep on top of them going forward. The FICA and Medicare tax is really off, and it's almost doubled for the village. And I've done all my checks and balances, and I can't really figure out why those numbers aren't jiving with what the actual should be. So I'm gonna have to do some more digging on that, but that's, I don't really have an answer as to why those are off. Obviously, health insurance, we know we changed health insurance policy, adding the platinum plan. That was all done at the end of budget season, so that is not reflected in the actual budget numbers, but the expenses are there, so we have overspent there considerably in some places and not so much in others. The water department seems to be okay because we had people that went from the insurance plan to the incentive and back and forth. So between those two, they sort of balance out. Another item is the janitorial services that was left off of the budget. I don't really have a reason why that was forgotten, but it was. So there's no budgeted expense for that. However, we do have cleaning done at the fire building and the police building, so there are expenses. We have corrected that for the next year, so there is a budget amount in that expense line. The mutual aid contract, we pay that twice a year. We haven't yet paid our second payment, so that should be coming anytime now. So that will look up to par as soon as we get that invoice. I still need to do some work on the old pension. I've had a little communication with the actuarial company on making sure that people were in the actual departments that they should be in. So the numbers are always it's kind of a moving target. We don't really know what they're going to be. I'm hoping to get that a little bit narrowed down closer to the target by making sure that people are being allocated to the right departments, because there was quite a few that were a little out of skew with the village. There was some fire that were coded as police and some police that were coded as fire, but I think I've gotten those under control. There is a line item for accident insurance, which is for the fire department. I can't remember, but I believe that I intended to add that into one of the other larger, like, general liability accounts. I'm going to have to research that a little bit more to be certain, but there was no budgeted amount for that. But the expense comes in around 900, 950 every year pretty consistently. And next year, I don't think that I gave that an expense budget either. So that tells me that I was doing something there and I need to remember what I was doing. There is an amount in the police vehicles purchase expense for $13,680. And that is for all of the wiring of all of the cameras and radios that went into the new police cruiser. Those things were over and above the amount that was available in the police capital fund, the vehicle fund account. So that had to be charged somewhere. So that's in the general fund. For the water and sewer revenue, we do still have the June payment to collect. That's on the 26th, I think, if that's a Monday. So that we should see some more revenue there to get that more in line with what we budgeted for. Chemical prices are way out of line, and I know that we've just had a lot of increases in a lot of areas this year. So that is just one of them that after budget was done, we figured that was going to be an overspent item. We do have Rob on Zoom. I know there were some questions from Jigs for the Walpole billing, the sludge grit, and the RMI contract. So after I'm done, we'll let him answer any questions that you have about that. We have the safety equipment of $16,010. Those were for trench boxes, but we also received a $10,000 revenue item that was a grant from BLCT towards the purchase of those. So it was really only a $6,000 expense. So basically, if you look at your balance sheets, I don't really see any overage happening in the general fund budget. It seems like by the time we get done with our the rest of our AP and the rest of our payroll, that we will be right on schedule to being pretty close to balanced. We're hoping for that. The water fund is pretty close to being balanced also, but we do have a rather large fund balance, so that really shouldn't be too big of a concern there. And the same with the sewer fund. We are over budget, but it seems like we're always over budget. I'm not really sure why the revenues just don't add up to what we think they're going to be, or we over expect revenue and we don't get it. I'm not positive, but again, we're not terrible in the fund balance, so it's not really that big of a problem at this point. And we are doing an increase in fees. I do believe that was brought up at one of the meetings and was voted on. So we will be bringing in a little bit more revenue. So hopefully that will help alleviate some of that. And that's all I got.
On the insurance, did you figure out that it looks like the building contents and vehicles were misallocated in terms of expenses, but this is on page 6 of the general fund. It doesn't look right. I mean, obviously the budget to build,
It looks like,
we got 200 budgeted for buildings and grounds, and it's 3,700 expense. Vehicles of 6,000, it's at $2,800. So
between the two, I think I budgeted, I'm not sure why that got askew like that, but the actuals are less than what was actually even budgeted between the two, so it was okay with that.
the what roughly is a payroll for the village? Their total share of payroll. You said we got 2 more to go. It looks like on this run, our expenses are 217,000 to the good. Our revenues are 30,000 to the bad. So we're like 187,000 to the good. We know we got the 19,000 for the dispatch. What's a payroll? You know, with all the different health benefits, et cetera.
I have never looked at that as a separate. I've never done any kind of valuation of how much of payroll is village and how much is town. That's not something that I could tell you right now. I could tell you.
Well, we're talking about a surplus and the, you know, obviously that's 2 big expense items that have to come out of this number, but anyway, we'll see it at the next meeting, I guess, and
There is a warrant from payroll that I did today, and I believe that the warrant, I ran the warrant, so I don't do it. I might not have done it the same way that Brenda does it, but I thought that they were done by expense account. So you might be able to look at the warrant and give yourself a quick idea of how much payroll was
I'm sure I can multiply it, what we've got and divide it by 52 or whatever. But anyway, that's okay. The biggest question I have has to do with the revenues from Walpole on the wastewater fund. It looks from this financial that we're, and you said Rob's on the line.
Yeah.
It looks like we've collected 3 of 4 billings. But Rob, what is the expectation for revenue from those 4 lines on Walpole? The bonds and the user fees.
Well, the bonds are going to be pretty close to what we budgeted. Those are pretty much well-known, usually within pennies from year to year. The Walpole bill that we typically do, which I believe is what the one you're questioning is, and that's based off their strength and their flow. So if that changes, I mean, it all depends on how much they use the system. If that goes down, then their bill is going to go down. So I believe we have 4 bills in this budget for Walpole. So that should be their total for the year, and it may be less this year than past. But I believe that's the number we typically put in there, and we have for the past years. So it's just that they haven't used it. Their strength wasn't as high. So it's not a guaranteed number. So it's based off, like I said, their flow and their strength.
I mean, if you look at our number, 820, and their number at 107, that would mean that they've gone from consistently using around 20% plus or minus a couple of percent, down substantially. That just doesn't figure.
Like I said, I don't have the bills in front of me. So I'm just assuming that they've used less. They use less water and their strength was less compared to ours. I mean, that's all I can assume.
The other thing is that we've already paid the debt service. If you look at the financial, we've already paid the debt service, and yet we still haven't collected. We've only collected 60% of the Walpole debt. Why is that the case?
Here again, I think we still have one more billing, but if we have 4 billings because we bill, quarterly, but Alyssa says that we've received 4 Walpole bills or 4 checks from them, then that's the way it is. I don't know. Without looking into it, Jigs, I don't have an answer for you. But
Yeah.
certainly can check on it and get you some answers.
These
But
revenue lines are the 4 billings that we billed out. So all 4 have been billed.
So why haven't they paid their bonds?
Well, no, they have. This is the,
Well, they haven't paid the bonds. The 120, the 36, and the 34, those are fixed amounts. And we've already paid. If you look at your financial statement, we've already paid the debt service. We should have collected it from Walpole if we'd had 4 billings. And I given Walpole's industrial, the commercial, et cetera, the fact that their usage would drop drastically for the user fees just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't. So anyway, obviously the combination of Scott, I'm going to ask you to sit down with everybody and get us some answers to this, because it's foolish to go further on this. But when there could have been some drastic thing happened in Walpole to cut down their usage, but there's certainly nothing that happened that would have cut down their requirement to pay the debt service. So,
No, we'll break down
so
what was received and we'll try to backtrack it and figure out what's in the 4 payments. And then we can at least give you a full report as to what was in there. Because there's a true up.
If the quarterly payments are in arrears, which I would expect they would be. We haven't finished June yet, so I mean, you would expect that you'd have to calculate.
But there's always
the June
one.
quarter.
There's always one that carries
There's always
over.
one true up payment that Rob does that sort of goes back and does a final calculation. And I don't know if the true up is one of the 4, which had been last year's.
No.
No.
What the true up is the true up is after we do audit from the previous year. Okay, so it goes through audit. We have to figure out what we spent on budget. So that's done from the previous year, not the year we're in. So we go back to the bills that we billed them previously and do a true up bill on actual expenses that we had in our budget.
Not one of the 4. Okay.
Well, it's part of one of the 4. It is part of one of the 4. It should have been the last one, I believe, is when we did the true up because we got the audit back. So it's part of the last bill we just received.
Right.
So it is part of the 3rd billing, 2nd or 3rd billing. It's whenever we get the audit done is when I go back and do the true up. But that's from the previous year. We go back and look at what we projected And then just like right now, we're going through what we projected we're gonna use in our budgets. But I can't do a true up until we do an audit to do actual expenses. So until the auditors say, yep, our books are good, here you go, which won't be until next year, February, March.
Okay, well, we can break out the 4 payments, what was allocated. And we should be able to at least answer then what the bond, because the bond is a straight allocation.
Yeah, correct.
So those numbers we can get fairly easily. We'll just send them
Our
off.
user fees from last year for Walpole were 162,000,
Okay,
and we're showing 107. So it just doesn't make sense.
Okay. Sounds like we're missing one payment, but that's just me off the hip right now. But if we have 4 sets, then we have 4 sets.
we'll dig into it. So
Yep.
numbers are there. And we'll get it back to the board.
Anything else on financials?
I just wanted to point out to you've all got the balance sheets.
Yes.
Mhm.
We talk about fund balance, and for the general fund, the fund balance really is a number that you can rely on. For the water and sewer fund, we have a lot of assets. So one of the things that I always look at is what is our cash balance? And it's usually on the first page of the balance sheets, around the middle, okay? And if you were to look at the general fund, page 1, right around the middle, it says due from funds, 869,000, you see that? Okay, so that's the general fund. The water fund, page 1, you've got 1,583,000. Huge cash balance. For the sewer fund, we have minus 49,000. So we were really counting this year on operating at a
Break even.
really at a small surplus.
Right.
In the wastewater fund. So these revenues from Walpole are really very critical in terms, especially when you figure we've got 2 more payrolls to hit these budgets.
Anything else from anybody on the financials? All right, that's fine.
I have one quick question on the PD financials. The investigations fund, page 7 of 8.
Those, I believe, are when we do backgrounds,
Oh, okay.
because we've been bringing on part-timers and other
Makes sense.
full-timers, so they do have to do a full background.
Yeah.
So that's reflective of that.
Anything else? Anybody? If not, I'll move down to review agenda items for our next meeting, July 11th, 2023.
Well, definitely financials preliminary.
Right. We'll have the Walpole billing update and circulate that to make sure everybody gets a chance to get that information. We'll update we'll hopefully have an update on the ARPA and the CDBG and the radio allocation as well. And I don't think we'll be ready to do anything with the ARPA moderator, probably not till August. So we'll at least have the ad out and at least announce to people if they're interested to submit their interests accordingly.
You had mentioned Lula lift update and police fire project allocation.
If we get the Lula lift information, we'll for sure move that forward. It's a different project if they don't approve the Lula, then it's a whole different
for the view.
Yeah, and a different potential grant process too. So,
What about an update on the, status of the review with the, fire marshal on the Fort code stuff, Springfield Regional Manager? Has that made any headway,
you mean
the inspections?
Ordinance?
the ordinance?
Yeah. You made any headway with that? I haven't heard, so.
Not much. The state really didn't do much with it after all that discussion. It just sort of fizzled out, I think, at the end of session. And I don't anticipate, the state's moving very slow on doing these agreements, so we'll see where we at. But they're not, I think they're hoping that the state will jump in and preempt this, so I think that's why they've been purposefully slow on doing these individual agreements for inspections for the rental programs. So we can follow up on that with them.
It's been a while since I
Right.
chatted with them.
Yep.
Anything else for the July 11th meeting?
At the moment. No.
Okay, how about, the next item, review agenda items for the joint board meeting September 26th?
Oh, we talked about the moderator too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Anything yet for the joint board meeting? People wanna,
We're hoping to have at least the first report from, if we get the solicitations for the feasibility study and we get the people on board, that they've started to work so that they would have something to report at that meeting on the 26th. With a goal of trying to get real information before the town completes its budget process, in case there's budgetary impacts from some of the recommendations.
And what's that, the feasibility study on what? On the,
So that was, remember, the three communities, the Saxons River, the village and the town, and then we did get the USDA grant for that. So we're
The fire
looking at
department.
fire study.
Fire
okay,
study.
Yeah, yeah,
equipment, manpower,
right.
stations, the whole 9 yards.
good.
So those are due back, I think, at the end of the month,
Okay.
the RFPs.
anything else that we have, we'll still meet the 11th of July, and then we also.
Probably have a list for tax sale by then.
Okay.
With the new, we do have the new 1-year procedure. Liz and I were talking about trying to figure it out by the end of August, early September, so we could have something at that meeting. And then if we're gonna do a tax sale, try to do it in October. It's not a great idea to do tax sales close to holidays. It looks kind of mean.
Yep.
Tax sales aren't fun anyway, but they're certainly not fun on holidays. So trying to avoid that.
Very good.
Merry Christmas, yes.
Anything else for September 26th?
And I believe Ridwig was gonna come and have a follow-up, but nothing of substance yet, so.
Okay. I'll move on to review and approve orders, bills, and warrants.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Motion been made and seconded that we review and approve orders, bills, and warrants. All in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And the motion carries. Other business. Jeff. Jake's.
All set.
Okay.
I have one quick question, so I'm gonna ask Gary as soon as he's still here. Gary,
Yes,
I was just curious, whatever happened to the sign over by the post office for the canal?
it's at the foundry where it was made, so the state owns the sign. They make those at a foundry near Barry, and it's there being refurbished. It's one of the older ones.
Oh,
And then we have another one that's there being refurbished as well. I think that might be around the meeting house.
So it's,
okay, so it's not like gone away forever.
It'll come back, cleaned up and buffed up and look all new and shiny and.
Oh, nice, all
Yeah.
right, I was just curious, thank you.
Any
We
other,
don't have a timeline on it though.
Yeah.
They couldn't provide one.
any other business? Anyone? Executive session, we need one.
No, I'll
Do
second.
not need one. I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Motion been made. Is there a second? It's seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor would say aye. Aye. And we are now adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Was it pretty safe for me to do the lesser NEPA review?
I would think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get that scheduled right now.
I would
It'll
definitely
make
do
things
that.
easier.
Recording stop.